I'm David Rosen from Wolfire Games, and
I'm Elizabeth Zelle. I work at Volition, best known for the Saints Row series, where I am a player experience researcher.
And I'm Christine Love. I made Analog Hate Story and Hate Plus, and I do basically everything except art and music at Love Conquers All Games.
alright. So how many game developers are here? Wow. How many game players?
That was a test.
So we have kind of a small panel today, so we could take questions at any time if you want to raise your hand like that. So I guess the first thing is we could talk about what does it mean for a game to be inclusive if we're talking about designing inclusive games. And the first thing I think about is just all these montages we see that just have the protagonist of every game, which is always the bald, white, angry-looking dude. So the first issue is just that every games tend to have like the same character who doesn't really have anything to him. And I think it would just be more interesting if we had just different kinds of characters, just at least for variety, and not exclude different players of different genders and races.
The way I look at it is that the gaming community itself is extremely diverse, and that's wonderful. It's one of the best things about the gaming community. And it would be fantastic if the games themselves would reflect some of the diversity, even a small percentage of the diversity that you see, in the community. You guys are the ones that buy the games. You're the ones who kind of dictate what games should be made and what games should look like. And I personally would love to see games move forward and try and reflect, the fan bases that are out there. There are obviously a number of different ways you can increase the diversity inside of your own games. And the way we've handled it specifically, Volition, is we obviously go for the customization angle. You can go through the game playing our default male character and you get the swaggering, white straight guy that everybody all knows from every other game. But that doesn't have to be your main character. Your main character can be anything, anyone. It can look like anything or anyone, and every NPC in the game will still treat you like you were equally a badass.
I feel like for me, I'm not super interested in the question of inclusivity so much as I am just as a player. I found that there weren't that many games being made that were specifically trying to appeal to me. There's certain things that are just completely locked off. Like romancing games to a lesbian is just for a long time now, it's just there is nothing. There is literally nothing. So really, my approach has just been, I make the stuff that I want to see. And I figure that there are probably a substantial number of players out there who also would like to see those things. Yes. I'm shocked. And so I've just found that making games, I've made games with me in mind, with lesbians in mind, and it turns out that actually, just by being interesting and different, that appeals to all sorts of straight people too. I have straight fans, bizarrely enough. I apparently making games for gay girls doesn't actually alienate everyone. It turns out you can actually sell your games just based off being interesting. Who knew?
Did you change anything in particular to make it appeal to straight people, or?
I begrudgingly acknowledge their existence. Well, so one of the first games I made, it just had a female love interest, and I never really thought about the idea that, oh sure, probably some men are going to play this too, until I got interviewed by a publication that will remain nameless. But they were very concerned that because the game had a female love interest, did this mean that it's only for men? So now my games explicitly ask the player's gender, just so you're aware. No, this is made with women totally can also romance that girl. I just want the straight people to realize, no, you're not special.
Yeah, we went for romance options in Saints Row 4, as anyone who's played the game might have experienced. Obviously it was kind of poking fun at certain other series and their romance options. This is Saints Row. What we do is poke fun at everyone and everything constantly. So he wasn't calling anybody out specifically, you know, with a, I don't know, a stern finger. But we really early on, it was never a question whether or not the romance options would be available to everybody. We did not care. That was part of our thing, is that, yeah, we are going to have female characters that are romanceable, and male characters that are romanceable, and robots that are romanceable. And there will be no respect at all given to the gender of the player character. Everybody can be romanced by everybody. And it even creates an interesting situation with one of our NPCs, Pierce, who his line when you romance him is, "I normally don't swing that way," which he plays for both men and women characters, which then makes you wonder, which way does Pierce normally swing? Yes.
So customization is definitely one option, where you can just choose who the player is. So you kind of have to go out of your way to bar certain combinations if you're going to, so you might as well just allow them all. But do you think it's also important to have games that are specifically for same-sex romance, or is it enough to make it customizable?
Well, I'm currently working on a game that has a lesbian protagonist and only and mostly women love interests, so yeah, I do feel like, you know, it's important to not just have games that are supposed to be about putting the player into whatever situation that like represents them as a person, but also like making people go outside of their comfort zone, like step into other people's shoes. Like making that explicitly not only available but required, I think has a lot of value to it. And there's also just like, you can only do so much with the player's character when they're supposed to be playing as themselves. Like, you can only put them in so much of an uncomfortable position if at the end of the day they're just going, oh yeah, this is me. I would totally do this the right way. This is how I would play things. And I think it gives people, you know, more room to experiment when you're specifically putting them into a role that is not necessarily something they chose. It gives them an excuse to, you know, be outside their comfort zone. They say, oh, well, I didn't choose to play as some sort of butch lesbian, but, well, if that's what the game's about, then I suppose.
Question?
Yeah, I mean, my sort of, like, bugaboo in this area is, like, I understand why the marketing is like, okay, we're gonna have this, you know, Mr. White Lantern Jaw guy in the ads, right? You can't fight the marketing department without killing them all. Sorry. But you know, this even goes down to in games where it's customizable. Like, what's the thing? Is it going to be like Lantern Jaw White guy as the default, right? It's like, why can't you have 12 random, like, you know, or like curated ones across a variety of genders and colors, and be like, we're going to roll the dice and give you this one, and you can change to one of the presets, but like, why can't it be a random preset that you know? That nobody's going to return the game because it's like, well, it gave me a black woman as a character, so like, you know, screw you, right?
Personally, I would love to see things go in that direction. You know, it's kind of a hard position of, you know, the gaming industry itself, the people who work in it, are overwhelmingly straight white dudes. Yeah. And I can't tell you how many conversations I've had where I've pointed something out, and the reaction is, oh, you know, just never would have thought about something from that perspective.
Yeah. One of the stories that I heard was there is a game where there's a gendered flag for the character, and it's a Boolean. It's a Boolean, so it's true or false. Mm-hmm. And they just, without thinking, made the false value be women. And that says things, whether you want it to or not, about the mentality of what's going on under the hood. Yeah.
Volition hired an outside company to run some focus tests for us. And, you know, we were like, you know, okay, yeah, we'd be a wide net. You know, we want to test with all sorts of different types of people. And it was when we were reviewing some of the initial surveys that we realized that in the recruitment survey, they automatically disqualified anyone who was a woman. We were just like, well, why? Well, the response from this professional company was, oh, well, we normally only run our tests with males. And we were like, but why? And we quoted, we gave them all sorts of numbers, you're like, the gaming entertainment, the most recent survey says 40-some% of gamers are women. Microsoft is saying around 45% of people with with Xbox Live profiles are women. I'm like, we know that women make up a huge chunk of the audience as gamers in general, and then we're Saints Row, we're not known for being particularly exclusionary. I'm sure we have a lot of lady gamers in our fan base. And it was just kind of the response of, oh, this is just how we've done it. I guess if you want, we'll test with women. And we said, well, yes, we will. And it's like, it's just that it's so entrenched, this idea of who the game, that every gamer is a straight white 18-year-old guy. And no, that is not what most gamers look like. But it's so hard to kind of fight this overwhelming, developers are overwhelmingly male and they come from things from a male perspective, and they're overwhelmingly Caucasian and they come from things from a Caucasian perspective. And then even outside vendors like this focus test company come from things from this really entrenched perspective. And it's hard to fight against that sometimes. Volition is great and diverse in many ways, but it's still 80% male. Where I try, but it's hard sometimes being like the spokesperson for all people, that I have to be the one person in the room who has to be like, actually that kind of sucks, can we try something different? But basically what it comes down to is I would love to see more things like that. People inside of the industry are pushing for it. I personally think the industry as a whole is moving that direction. It just can be hard to go against the flow of the tide sometimes, so it can be a little delayed.
Also for indies, you can just tell them.
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty likely that they just didn't think about it. Like when I was thinking about this panel, I thought about my older projects. One of them that I did in high school is Black Shades, which had a procedural city where you go around trying to protect a VIP. And I was looking at it, and the city is populated entirely by white men. It's creepy.
Wait, we can just put them all in one place?
What was weird is nobody ever mentioned that to me. So, if someone's making a game and it's all super racist and sexist like that, then you should tell them.
I thought that was an interesting point what you just said when it came to the people doing the research automatically excluded women from the survey. How much do you think that has a role to play in terms of opening up the spectrum to being inclusionary for all different genders and all different sexualities in a situation like this? When it comes to marketing, research, and advertising, because we focus a lot on the development cycle, but who we advertise to and how we advertise is going to play a role in terms of showing that these are people who play these games too.
I think that's huge as well. I speak from the Saints Row perspective. If anyone's familiar with the history of Saints Row, they will know that we came from a very porn star-based marketing perspective. Wasn't my personal favorite, but that's what our marketing team said was the way to go to market our game. Let's put porn stars in it, quite literally. In Saints Row 2, we had a special DLC pack entirely about Tara Patrick, a porn star. She was in our game. For Saints Row 3, we went the same route again. We had a whole DLC pack that was Penthouse Pets. Yeah, I'm completely happy with these women having fantastic jobs and hopefully being successful, and I have no problem with porn stars as people. My problem was that our marketing department said, this is obviously, TNA is the only way to market our game. When obviously we have a lot more to offer than just that. Since we are now under new management, we were owned by THQ. THQ went bankrupt. We are now owned by Deep Silver out of Germany, and our new corporate management seems a lot more open to not going for just porn stars. So yeah, but I think it's really important. Yeah, I think it's really important though to acknowledge that who we're marketing to and who we're making games for is a really diverse group of people, and going for the same trite idea of who a gamer is over and over fails. But if we're only doing focus tests with, men, then we're obviously going to be missing something. If we're only doing focus tests with straight people, we're obviously going to miss something. And it will just be a snowball effect of, oh, well, this game doesn't appeal to women, but we didn't actually consult any women on the making of the game. So, but small percentage of women played it, so obviously we don't need to focus test with them in the future. It just is a cycle that just feeds on itself. And so it does need people to basically say, this is wrong, can we do something different this time?
The other thing that can happen in a larger company is that it'll actually be just one small subset of the team that does a thing that, I had this recently happen, I worked at Linden Lab, where basically 2 guys worked on a feature, it wasn't presented to the rest of the company until it was too late in the process, and everybody was like, hey, this is kind of sexist and we don't like it, and they're like, oh, well, our deadline is next week, so we have to patch it, basically.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like the voices are there, but sometimes you don't get the input in the right time in the process. But it's getting, I think it is getting better because you get the chance eventually to say, hey, no, don't do that.
Okay.
I was going to add, the funny thing about the porn star example is that even in that instance, it's also specifically one type of porn star.
Yes.
Even, you could be diverse even within the realm of porn stars.
Yeah, I argued that if we were going to have penthouse pets, I'm like, where are the burly dudes and, and Speedos? I'm like, that would make me happy. A nice balance there. But my opinion was small in the company.
It seems like in Saints Row 4 you kind of have a case study against the whole sort of laziness issue, or it's too much work to put inclusive things in games issue of, we can't animate women, that's too hard. Or you can just make a game where any, using sort of that perspective of whatever character you are, whatever sexuality, whatever gender, whatever color, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We just made the same thing for you, so everybody's equal. It seems like that's like almost kind of a perfect way of getting around that without having to pander to, the 18 to 35-year-old white dude demographic.
Basically, the way I look at it is, at Volition, we treated our customization system as a crucial feature to our game.
Yeah.
So early on in pre-production and production, it was always planned for. There was time and resources and money devoted to this system because it was a crucial system. If weapons are crucial to your game, you make sure you have the time in development to get those weapons in. If you treat customization and having playable character options as crucial to your game, then it will happen. If you treat it as an extra that maybe we can add on at the end if we have time, a number of you raised your hands as game developers, you never have time. There is always deadlines that you are hitting way too early, and you're never going to have this extra mythical time to add things. And if you as a company deem it crucial to your player experience on the game to have diversity for your player characters, it will happen. Customization isn't easy, it isn't cheap, it's resource intensive, you have to have skilled people working on your team to pull it off. But if you think that this is important to this game you're making, you'll make it happen.
One note about animation is retargeting an animation to a female character is really quite trivial. There was a blog post by John Cooper, the lead animator on Assassin's Creed 3, who was saying that it would be about an hour of work. They were saying that they couldn't do it for Unity, but he did it for a DLC in literally an hour.
Yeah.
Because they have 50 full-time animators on the Assassin's Creed animation team. It's not a challenge for them. It's not like they're changing it to a giant ogre or a spider or something.
They're basically spiders.
Playable spiders.
What do we even do with all the other legs? I don't know.
It's a female.
I have ideas.
Yeah.
So I had a question about writing in particular, because you were working on sort of interactive novels. How do you approach writing for more diverse characters?
What the writing comes down to every single character I write, they have a different perspective on what the player's gender or sexuality or perspective is. Some characters, just in Analog, Hyane does not really care if you're a man or woman or not. She's she's head over heels for you regardless. It never influences what she says at all. Whereas the other character is very sort of comes from a patriarchal background. The player as a woman can still romance her, but her dialogue is actually like, there's basically 2 versions of every line she has. It was really extensive, but this is because this is a character that gender is super important to. So it's important that's reflected in the character. So I think really it just entirely depends on what your game is about. If you're making a game about medieval patriarchy, the player's gender might be extremely important to writing. If you're making an epic space opera about saving the universe, it's probably not going to be too relevant. So really, that's just what it comes down to. And at the same time, it was very easy to, to find the time to make these writing differences, because they're just like fundamental to the character. Like, you won't understand where this person is coming from unless you can actually see from both perspectives. And I think that's like super interesting that you don't see in a lot of games. They just assume that one player, like, it's just the player's default perspective, that's like the valid one. It's not really. Maybe you'll try through with like evil morality, you shoot everyone. Which doesn't really, I don't know, I don't think that really tells you anything quite as interesting as actually like exploring characters from how they feel about gender.
Makes sense.